Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And, I find it interesting that, I kind of cruise around other comment sections of other people that cover this case. And I find something that's happening, especially here recently, more and more, very interesting. And that is, I seem to be the only one that is getting just a quite a large number of guilters in my comment section really hammering old Pob for things. And not only that, I seem to be the only one that keeps getting comments by Steve G. And he left me a comment the other day, and I've been waiting to address it. I'm going to go ahead and address it in this video. And I think the reason why, and I don't know why they're coming out and attacking me so early, because, we've got till September 3rd before the deadline for Kohberger to file post-conviction relief. And they're starting to hammer me now, right? Why not wait till after September 3rd and see if he files or not before y'all hammer me? Because you're nervous. That's the only reason they're doing it, is because they're nervous. And they should be, because it's not just what I'm saying. See, I did a video the other day that should really scare a lot of people out there that want this thing to be over. They should really be scared, and not because of the information that I put out, but it was because of the information that somebody that is close to this case that came out and tried to paint the picture of Brian Kohberger being guilty in this case, but also laid out in his own words a clear path to Brian Kohberger's freedom. And when I start going through and talking about the things that I'm talking about related to Brian Kohberger filing post-conviction relief and actually having enough backing by the law now to overturn the objection to the point to where they couldn't even retry him, those are not even my words. Those are the words of Gilter Cy. So when I start to see these attacks coming at me and the logic behind them, I just have to use not my words. I'm going to use Cy's words and the law that he pointed to in the interview that painted the picture to Brian Kohberger being free. And I feel bad for the people that don't understand or grasp the concept that Cy put out there, because the concept based on the law is very, very sound. First, I want to talk about the double standard, though, right? The double standard, picking and choosing. A lot of times, people accuse me of picking and choosing. Well, and maybe I do that a little bit, but other people seem to do it a little bit more than me. For example, the G family, when they listened to the interview with Cy, they picked and chose. And Harsh, I think, did a good job of going over this. Let's listen to exactly what they picked and chose to hear and put to the forefront based on the interview Cy gave with Custody Queens.
In this video, I wanted to go over a post, right? It was a post that was done by the Gonsalves family. Basically, it was a Gonsalves post in response of Cy and the interview that he did. Well, first of all, I think to myself, so look, this family are clearly still watching and interacting and wanting to see what's happening around this case. There is literally 5 things that they raise as kind of their favourite things that Cy had said. And I want to go into each of these things individually, because I think that, again, is it willful ignorance? Let me just read this. So it says, let's talk about Cy. He was actually an expert defence witness, and he let the cat out of the bag. A few of my favourite statements, 10 out of 10 juries would have convicted BK. The next one was, Dylan is a victim. Ethan did not have a fistful of hair. There was no, and that's in capital letters, no cleanup. BK had been by the house at least once a week.
Appreciate you going through that, Mr. Harsh. I'll put the link to Harsh's video in the description where he addresses each one of those. Now, I'm not here to address all the things that the G's pointed out that they liked from the interview that Cy gave. What I'm going to point out is all the things that they ignored from that interview, but also the comment. that they chose to leave on my video, which I find interesting. And I find kind of sad when I break it down, because I will break it down because it was addressed to me. And I feel like I, have to give it its due whenever they do leave me a comment, because I have respect, absolute respect. And if what their comment said was right, I would say where it was right. And what their comment said is absolutely wrong, I'm going to point out where it's wrong. But I'm not going to point out where it's wrong from my perspective. I'm going to point out where it's wrong based on everything I heard the same person that they're, highlighting all the things that they liked he said. I'm going to point this out in the same concept of the things that he said in that interview that contradict everything he says in this comment. And then we'll get into what Cy Ray really said and lay it out, because Cy Ray said it this time, not me. All right, and here's Mr. G's comment. He says, checkers or chess? Pro Burgers insist that IgG should be discarded, as though removing one thread unravels the entire tapestry. But that argument depends on a misunderstanding of what IgG actually was. And he says, mate N5. So basically what he's going to do is he's going to go through his checkmates on this. But he does it backwards, as I'm going to have to reorganize everything. This should have been checkmate in 1, but he's making this mate in 5, and he's going to go backwards. So he says, Judge Hippler's point was straightforward. IgG was an investigative lead, not evidence. Was a lead, not evidence. Well, evidence and leads are, kind of interchangeable there. A lead is a direction, a move on the board, a possibility, a path worth exploring. It is not proof. Mate in 4. After all, IgG didn't identify Brian Kohberger, you morons. It led investigators towards Michelle Kohberger, whoever that is. I think he's meaning to say Michael Kohberger, mate in 3. And that one is absolutely just, sorry, you're calling us morons, Mr. OGI. And not only can you not type correctly a name that's supposed to be Michael, but what you're saying there is you're calling other people morons is a moronic statement. I'm not calling you a moron, but this statement you made here is moronic, and I'll show you why. The investigation did not end there. Investigators developed additional evidence, followed additional leads, and ultimately confirmed BK's identity through a cheek swab, not IgG, mate in 2. Correct. You're absolutely correct. They developed additional evidence, additional leads, confirmed his identity through a cheek swab, not IgG. Right, mate in 2. More importantly, Pro Burgers, Pro Burgers. Well, you get to name calling, man. Investigators already had BK's name before the IG process even began, mate in 1. This is just too easy. Happy smiley face. In an investigation that generated roughly 75,000 tips, IgG was one lead among many. Right. But how many tips had Brian Kohberger's name on it before the IgG there, OZI? That's where you're messing up, bro. Not the foundation upon which everything else depended. That's where you're messing up as well. Some people keep staring at a single move and declaring victory. But a game is not won by understanding one move. It's won by understanding all the moves on both sides of the board. You're correct unless that one move led to all the moves on both sides of the board, as I'm going to point out. So for those that are a bit slow to follow, yes, you the Pro Burgers, look at he's mean. Look how mean. On July 2nd, 2025, BK said out of his own mouth that he killed Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan in exchange for 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. I love the way you say in exchange for. Right, he said that in exchange for, right? Like it was a deal. You say this, here's what you get. Plus an additional 10 years. Ho almost forgot the moron. Ho almost forgot the moron waved bye-bye to his right to appeal. Who you calling a hoe, man? But clearly you Pro Burgers just don't get it. Nevertheless, with that, it's checkmate. Looking forward to September morn. Do you remember? Look how far we've come. So far from where we used to be, but not too far that I've forgotten what it was before. I miss you, Kaylee. September morn. Pob, do the right thing and move on. 10 out of 10 juries think you should. 10 out of 10 guilter juries think I should, OGI, but I will not move on because of injustice, bro. And I appreciate you. I can imagine from the bottom of my heart how much you miss Kaylee. And that is not what I'm talking about in this scenario. What I'm talking about is truth and justice, bro. And you ignore all of the truth that would lead to justice. And I can't let it happen, man. But let me go ahead and break down your thoughts here, because your mate in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, number one, you put them in here in reverse order. So I got to take them in the correct order. The G's 5 mates. The first one was they already had BK's name prior to the IGG. The second one was the investigation didn't end there. There was additional evidence, and IGG was just a lead and was confirmed by the cheek swab, mate 2. Mate 3 was the IGG led to, he said Michelle Koberger, but it's actually Michael Koberger, not Brian, mate 3. The IGG was just a lead, not proof, mate 4. Is that why you keep saying, well, the IGG doesn't lead to who did it, it leads to all the people that didn't? Throwing out the IGG is a misunderstanding of the big picture, mate 5. This is not even a mate here, bro, but let me show you how this really works. Mate 1, they already had BK's name prior to the IGG. Right, we've identified 2 documents where they had BK's name prior to the IGG. The problem you're going to have is the first document that identified Daniel Tiango logging Elantras is documented in court documents and in court by Brett Payne himself, saying we never had Brian Koberger's name until December 19th, and he did not follow up on anything from Daniel Tiango till December 20th. We now have the communications and the emails and the internal comms proving this fact. So until the IGG produces Koberger as a lead, they don't look into Daniel Tiango's findings. So once again, it'll be the domino effect going backwards. But then you've got the other document that y'all are excited about, and that's the Amazon broad warrant for K-bars. Well, it's quite clear that that warrant was going to be inadmissible under the U.S. Constitution due to being too broad of a search. And they knew this. That's why they filed for the exact same warrant, getting the exact same information after Brian Koberger was arrested, because they knew the warrant for that information that they obtained before the arrest would not hold up to being an admissible piece of evidence due to the U.S. Constitution rights. So that one, again, the second warrant would fall under fruit of the poison tree. The first warrant would be inadmissible due to a broad search. So these 2 things that you're pointing out in mate number 1 are mate 0, buddy. Now, the IGG led to Michael Koberger, not Brian. That is absolutely incorrect in every possible way. You're misunderstanding where the tree led to a specific individual, and it did not. IGG does not lead to a specific individual. IGG leads to a list of potential individuals. From that list, additional work has to be done to produce an investigative lead. So you thinking the IGG led to Michael Koberger is absolutely not even relevant, is not in any document, and goes against the entire IGG scenario. So that one you can just take out altogether. But the IGG was just a lead, not proof, mate 4. Right. However, without that lead, nothing else happens, Mr. G. So without the IGG being the domino that started everything, every piece of evidence that was obtained after the IGG, or even evidence that was obtained before the IGG that wasn't investigated until the IGG, is what's called the domino effect of fruit of the poisonous tree. The investigation didn't end there. There was additional evidence, and IGG was just a lead and was confirmed by the cheek swab, mate 2. Right, but without the IGG as an investigative lead, all of the evidence obtained after that, CSLI, Google, Apple, anything, all came because of the IGG. Anything that was obtained before that wasn't investigated until the IGG is actually part of the same domino effect. Even the cheek swab there, mate, that came after the IGG is part of the domino effect. So if IGG goes just like your guy Nye said, goes the case. Now, let's lay out what Cy Ray actually said and the pathway to this one being thrown completely out, never brought back, Mr. G, because you want to highlight the things you like. Let's highlight the things you really don't like.
This investigation has so many errors in it that it is potentially corrupted from ever actually showing justice through a trial proceeding or through a jury. When we add the legal issues of how you can obtain that evidence, the proper way to analyze that evidence, the proper interpretation of that evidence, now we get to kind of a 50-50 thing. I think there's probably 50% of the courts throughout the United States that would have suppressed a lot of evidence in this case, enough so that a conviction may never be obtained. And, if anybody doubts me or they're like, that Cy Ray guy, he's crazy, he's a conspiracy theorist. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is simply Google Jeffrey Nye, Fox News. And Jeffrey Nye is one of the the attorney generals in Idaho, who did all the oral arguments in court as it relates to the DNA evidence in this case. And if you listen to that interview, he'll tell you firsthand, everything was at stake on the DNA. If they lost the DNA, everything that comes behind it would have been gone.
My personal role, my biggest role probably in the case, was handling all of the briefing and argument related to investigative genetic genealogy. That was a new issue in Idaho, and so it was a pretty big deal. And so Bill asked me to kind of step in and take that on.
So I guess the obvious question for everybody out there, Bill, is without the IgG, was there ever any real chance of securing a conviction against Bryan Kohberger?
In this case, because the investigative genetic genealogy is how they identified the defendant, that would have meant virtually everything. The stakes couldn't have been higher with respect to the evidence pointing to the defendant. If you watch, when I did the oral argument in that, Judge Hippler, his very last question to me was, Mr. Nye, if the FBI did in fact violate Mr. Kohberger's constitutional rights, you would agree that that would burden the state.
Now, I remember that part of the hearing when the judge said that. I may not have I knew it was a big deal, but I may not have realized just how big of a deal it really was. Let's go back and take a look at that first, and then I've got another question about it.
The FBI, in fact, violated the Fourth Amendment rights of Mr. Kohberger. You would agree the state is burdened by that?
That's a great way of putting it, Your Honor. Yes, the state would be burdened by that. Yes.
Now, what did you understand Judge Hippler to mean when he asked you that question in that hearing?
Judge Hippler, his very last question to me was, Mr. Nye, if the FBI did in fact violate Mr. Kohberger's constitutional rights, you would agree that that would burden the state, is the way he phrased it. And what I understood him to be asking, and what I believe he was asking was, you agree with me that if I find that this was a violation of the Constitution, you lose everything, pointing to the defendant. And I said yes. So that the stakes were pretty high on that one. That if I find that this was a violation of the Constitution, you lose everything, pointing to the defendant.
So I'm not here to point out, hey, I'm right, you're wrong there, Mr. G. But when you start calling people morons and they're pointing out the things that, I don't know, the prosecutor in the case pointed out, and you're highlighting things that an expert said, but you're not highlighting the other things that he said, why don't you dig in a little bit deeper? Because he goes on to say, study Garza v. Idaho, Chatry, U.S. Supreme Court ruling that strengthens Carpenter that the defense happened to preserve on all their objections around IgG. And there's a clear-cut way that, I mean, they filed for post-conviction relief here before September 3rd, and they cite Garza. I think y'all should all just have your everything's going to fall right into your stomach, because you're going to know the play from there. Because Cy Ray said it, not me. Garza v. Idaho. Chatry. Look at Chatry and what it's done for preserved objections on Carpenter. If it's reinstated to trial status, all they have to do is revisit the objections that they already have preserved on the record with the new U.S. Supreme Court ruling on Chatry. those objections are now going to have to be upheld by Hitler. And even if he didn't, and here's the thing about Hitler. This is how I know Hitler would uphold the objection. Hitler has only had one ruling overturned by the appellate court. Hitler rules by what he knows the appellate court will uphold. He knows an appellate court, based on the new Supreme Court ruling, would uphold or would overturn his ruling if he ruled with the prosecution on those same objections with the new strength of the Chatry ruling. He knows that they would be overturned on appeal. He will not rule on something that will be overturned on appeal. It's just something that he does. So he would have to rule in favor. Once that happens, fruit of the poisonous tree, everything after it, before it goes away, because they didn't investigate anything until the IGG came back. And it didn't come back to Michael Koberger. It came back to everybody in the line of that entire family tree. Through that line, they went through and picked one out. You know that. So I don't know why you would even make the statement if it came back to Michael Koberger. You're trying to do some nefariousness there, or I wouldn't call other people morons with thinking like that. Just my personal opinion. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Pav will continue on. Pav's out.